But yet, so often I think when lots is against you, it's amazing how God will take all of those ill experiences and difficult things and make them a strength.
Yeah.
And so maybe in some ways, if they've had the most against them, maybe they'll have the most power in the end to go out and really make some differences in their community. That's my prayer for them. I would love to see that happen with these young people.
Jerry Stinger, my friend, welcome to CitiServe Leadership Podcast.
Pleasure to be here.
We're going to have a conversation today about life in Longview and life in business in Longview. Jerry's a realtor with RE/MAX, and we'll talk about that some. But I want to start first. What was it like growing up in Longview? What was it like being a kid here? What did you do, and what was your life like here?
I love Longview. Longview's been, my family's here. Obviously, my friends are here, and I grew up here with those small town values. I think they're so important, Jeff. And
it's funny you say small town because I'm from Cowlitz County.
Yeah, well, that's a micro
this
town.
Is like huge.
That's a micro town. Cowlitz County grows into a town like Longview, right? So to have that opportunity to grow up here, it's, as you get older, you're thinking, I can't wait to leave and go someplace, go to the big city, and I did that to some extent. I mean, I left, went to Texas, and got a degree in biblical studies there, and then I came back for a short time. Then I went over to California and finished up a degree over there, and it's weird after being around all these other places. I just this little haunting community called Longview just kept kind of pulsating in my heart, saying, "You got to go back."
Yeah,
and so growing up there. I think had more of an influence than I recognized because it made me want to come back here again after I realized what a value it really was. It is.
What did you do as a kid?
I'm going to give you a very short synopsis of how I came to know Jesus because that's I think that's a lot of my story. So I was walking down the road with my buddy Jamie when I was younger, and I started getting my hip was bothering me, and I remember Jamie said it's a Charlie horse, and we were laughing because I didn't know what that term meant. But my mom took me to the doctor. Come to find out, I had a disease called Perthes disease. And Perthes disease was softening of your hip. And the only way they knew how to cure that was to stay off of the leg altogether. So I was in a sling on crutches for 2 years. And that started at age 5.
At 5?
At 5. And so, and then it spread to the other hip, and I was in a wheelchair for 2.5 years. So right in the most formative time in my life, really, I was crippled. And to make it even worse is they kept taking me to different schools because a school would become handicapped accessible. So I was in 5 elementary schools growing up.
Oh my gosh! And
every time I go into a new elementary school, kids are just cruel, man. They would come up and kid me mercilessly and all that. And I won't forget because all I did all day long was wheel in a wheelchair. So you can imagine as a young kid doing this, my upper body was rather developed by this time. And I just had I don't know what it was. I think there's 2 things that can happen when you're, when you have things like that come upon you. You can either withdraw to yourself and be silent, or you can just lash out. I was the latter. I was a lash out kid. So I go in because I knew exactly what was going to happen, Jeff. I go to the school, the bully would start bullying me. And so at the recess that first day, I'd roll out and I'd roll up to the bully. I'd jump out of my wheelchair and I'd beat the living tar out of him. And I did this in
This is the prison thing.
Yeah,
this is
exactly what it was.
Prison.
I mean, but the funny part of the story continues from here. And I would do this at the schools I went to because I knew that's what I had to do, or otherwise I was going to get just absolutely, tongue lashed by these kids. And so we get sent off to the principal's office, and the principal, because it's just every day I can still see it's my mind, a smile. Principal come out of his office. He'd look at the bully who'd been there many times in his office before, and then he'd look over at me in the wheelchair, and you can see his mind going, "What's going on here? Well, what is this? Look at the bully. Look at me." And he'd look at me and go, "You can leave," and I'd wheel off. So, but that was a really formative, because it was during that time of my life when I was going, I had no friends. I wanted friends more than I wanted anything else. I really didn't have, because I was so different at that point in my life. And I had this make-believe friend that in my heart, just like, when No one cares. I care. And I would talk to my make-believe friend. Sounds weird?
No.
But it was what I had at the time. Fast forward a little bit. Finally, the Perthes disease stuff went away, and I'd gotten into athletics, and I'd gotten friends through the things that I did. And I remember going to Longview Community Church, and Pat Lambert was there.
Yeah.
Remember Pat?
Oh, yeah.
And Pat was talking about, he said, hey, when no one else cares, when no one else loves you, the Bible says there's a friend that sticks closer than a brother. And I knew right there, that make-believe friend that I had in my life, who was there when I needed him the most.
Yeah.
It was Jesus.
Yeah.
He was that friend. And so in some ways I came to know Jesus came to faith and came to know him that night. But really he'd been there for a long time before that.
Yeah,
and just set me up to the point when I actually made that commitment. And so it all kind of started from there.
That is amazing.
Yeah.
Did you feel support? Where did you get your support from?
I had, I didn't come from a Christian family. I came from I love my mom is a wonderful lady, and married numerous times. So we've had a lot of divorce in my family. My grandparents were stalwart. I love my grandparents. They were, because when I go to my grandparents' house, it was, there was security there.
Yeah.
And so they meant a lot to me. And then I was so fortunate that God put men in my life along the way that were mentors for me as I went through it. And so very grateful for a lot of those men that helped me to, I think, become a person that understood Christ and stuck with him.
So let's go back just a bit. When you were struggling with that illness, it must have been really difficult, obviously. It must have been, there must have been a lot of questions. When you actually did develop a relationship with Jesus, how did you look back on that time and see Jesus during that time? Where was he at during that time?
I was really grateful that he was there.
Yeah.
I mean, that he was the lifeline. I mean, without having him, reveal who he was, and me seeing it before, it would have all seemed so hopeless, but it seemed purposeful. It felt like he was there. And I've always said, it's interesting. I think a lot of it, my relationship with everybody, I think, has their own personal relationship with Jesus, the personal thing. Mine is, I see Jesus as a friend.
Yeah.
Some see him as a father, some see him as different things. For me, he revealed himself to me as a friend. And so I've always had this wonderful friend. He is my Lord and Savior, and he is my, the Father, all those things. But more than that, he's been that friend that stuck closer to brother. And so I always have seen him that way.
When you have a conversation with somebody, you can tell pretty quickly that Jesus isn't your friend.
Yeah.
You really need a friend, and you have one.
Yeah.
Do you feel like, are you outspoken about that? Like,
I'm outspoken about everything. I mean, I'm a talker. I need to probably listen more, but yeah, I mean, I think in life you look at people and you, one of the things I think is the most important thing in our lives is to understand your giftings.
Yeah. What
are you gifted at? And not to say, you ever tell somebody like, hey, gosh, you really have a real gift. And, oh, no, that's not me. I'm not gifted at all. And you want to say, and I've actually said to them before, don't do that.
Yeah.
You're gifted, man. God's given you a gift in that way. You light up the room when you use that gift. So why are you not using it? And I think that that's part of what it is in life sometimes with people. I think you look at people, and I think you need to encourage them in the things that you see that they're good at.
Yeah, for sure.
And tell them, don't be ashamed of this. In fact, get up on the top of the hill and yell at the top of your voice. This is because your gifts are going to show. And people will tell me, they'll go like, well, how do I know my gifts? I said, that's super easy. That's super easy to tell because you'll see it in the eyes of the people around you.
Yeah.
When you're operating in your gifts, everything's going right, man. People are, just chugging along. They're doing well. So use your giftings.
Well, not only that, but you can always turn to the person on your right or left and ask them.
Yeah.
Because the people around you know what your gifts are in a way that you really can't see sometimes. So tell me, what was high school like?
High school was I loved high school because, remember, I guess I had that friend deficit. It keeps coming back to the friend thing for me. And so then I gathered friends. And so I really loved and respected my friends that I had. And so I had a great time in high school. I was in athletics, I was in that wheelchair and everything for so long. To have the ability to be able to go out and play sports and do all that was really wonderful for me. So yeah, I have nothing but great experiences through my high school time, and I was serving Jesus through that. I had no problems there. There was a unique movement, and I tell young people this, but when I was in school, I graduated in 1980.
Yeah.
There was a move of the Holy Spirit that swept across Longview, that young people were coming to know Jesus. It was more normal for people to be going to Bible studies and know about the person of Christ when I was in high school than it wasn't.
Yeah.
And so I keep looking at that and go, it seemed pretty natural to me because I was in that kind of movement. It's like the Jesus movement for young people here in Longview. And I keep saying, it's coming again.
Yeah.
I feel it's coming again, that the Lord is going to really pour out again. And I was fortunate enough to be, I think, in that slot where I was able to take part in that.
Yeah, there was a lot going. You mentioned community church, Pat Lambert, and the guys that he was around, Randy Sunberg, and all those guys.
Yeah.
They were lighting things up. That was a huge youth group.
Yeah.
And just to give you some perspective, I graduated in '73, so 7 years earlier, I didn't know one Christian in Class County High School.
Wow.
Not one. I mean, I didn't even know that if there was one. And so there must have been a shift in the 80s that happened that was really significant.
Yeah, it was a wonderful time. I mean, I feel sorry for kids today. I know that their pressures are so much different than the ones that I faced when I was in school.
Yeah, yeah. So how did you decide what you were going to do after high school, since you were walking with Jesus through high school?
I started off. I went to the University of Puget Sound to play football. So I went there for half of a year, and I'd blown my knee out my senior year in high school. My senior year in high school, my football team, we played for the state championship at Washington, and it was so hard for me because team captain, I put all the time in, it meant so much to me, and yet here, second game into the year against Kelso, blow my knee out and I'm out. And so I'm watching all of this success and all this stuff go on, and that was probably the hardest part of my high school years. It's like, Lord, why? I mean, why is this happening? And why can't I be a part of this? And all of that. So I rehabbed my knee, went over, played the year at University of Puget Sound. I was a linebacker, and just never was the same.
It's hard to come back.
I mentally couldn't get there, even though they said, hey, the knee's fine. I just, you got these, 300-pound guards firing out at your knees, and you're thinking, do I want to go through all that rehab stuff again? And so football didn't mean as much to me, I think, after that. So I started thinking I'd go up to the roof of my dorm room over there and pray. Every place I went, I always had prayer places that were like, God would call me to, if you will, and they were mine. And so I just started thinking, Lord, I want to do something different. And one of my mentors was Gene Smith, and Doc Smith was on the board of directors at Christ for the Nations in Dallas, Texas. Yeah. And so he just said, you need to go to Christ for the Nations. So I did. I took off.
Did you go by yourself?
All by myself. Got on a plane and flew over there. And my folks are going, you're going to do what? And all that. I mean, they were just like, I said, yeah, I don't know. I'm just going to do it. So I went over there, got an associate's degree in practical theology, and was around. It was a pretty charismatic place. It was pretty normal over there to when you're walking along, people would be slain in the spirit, and you're walking over them on the way to class. So it was a little bit of a different gig for me. It took me a while to kind of get used to this more charismatic feel, but
well, that had a huge impact on Longview too, because you used to send Mike Shea these cassette tapes of your worship sessions over there.
Which
and
was
we
amazing.
Actually learned the songs on those tapes, and that became the formative songs at Shekinah.
Yeah, that's funny you say that, because yes, Christ the Nation was known for their worship, and I was very fortunate in so many ways, because not just there, but then later on when I went to school in California, I was right by the Vineyard, and so I was with the Vineyard music when the Vineyard came in, and then Calvary Chapel was over there. I mean, I don't know why, but for whatever reason, I'm not a musician. I can sing, but I can't play. But I've been around some of the great worship stuff, that's been around. So I'm blessed in that way.
I remember I hadn't been a part of Shekinah that long, and 1 week they were Roger was announcing that there was this guy who used to be part of Shekinah come back from college, and he's bringing a friend of his, and you and Tim Story popped in.
Yeah.
Tell me about that relationship. Because that was one of the most intriguing relationships early on, as I saw as a.
That's interesting.
When
I was at, so I had went to school in, I finished my 2 years at Christ the Nations, came back and was working with the singles at Shekinah with Lucas, with Raj and all them. So did that for a short time. And I thought what I was going to do is I was going to come down and kind of get involved. And then I decided I want to go and get my degree. So I took off and went to Vanguard in California. So I was there. And while I was there, met a couple really good buds. And we started doing a prayer thing where we would meet 2 days a week, and we would go over to, there was Newport Mesa Church was over there, and we'd go into a room, turn the lights off, and there was 4 of us, and we'd pray. And Tim was one of those guys. Tim kind of, can't remember really where I first met Tim, but it was at school. But we invited him, hey, why don't you come pray with us? And so Tim started showing up all the time. And so for us, these 4 guys, for 2 years while we were there, gosh. We never missed. We were 2 days a week, an hour or more if it was needed, that we would just sit and pray. And so I built this relationship with Tim. Tim's a funny guy because Tim is. He's one of the few people I know that knew exactly what he wanted to do.
Yeah,
he knew it. I mean, the rest of us are trying to figure out what we want to be. Tim's going, I'm an evangelist. I'm gonna lead 1 million people to Jesus. I mean, you ask him what he would tell you exactly.
Well, that's the feeling I had when you came back to Shekinah. It's like, these 2 guys are going to take over the world. I mean, look out.
Yeah, Tim's been, since he's been on Oprah and all the other stuff, I mean, he's become a guy that's actually in that world. And I mean, I don't know if it's what he thought it would be when he got there or not. We really have kind of lost touch. But yeah, Tim was an amazing. That whole time was an amazing time.
Yeah. What came next? What happened next after getting out of school?
I got out of school, came back to Longview, and while I was down at school in California, I was involved in the Vineyard movement.
Yeah.
So John Wimber, and loved the movement and was a part of that. Helped in a couple of church plants down there while I was down there, and but again, that calling kept bringing me to say Longview, and so there came a point I was working with Ed McGlass, and he was a former football pro, and started a church there in California. I was working with him and just said, hey Ed, I got to go back. I feel like God's calling me back home, and so that's where I went. Came back home and was walking down Commerce, and you know how Ciances had all those pictures they would take? I was walking along there, and there was this family that was there, and this really hot lady, man. Not the mom, the girl, right? She was hot.
I hope.
And so anyways, I mean, I remember just seeing her going, wow, what a beautiful lady. And just didn't think much more of it. Well, we're 31 years married now.
That's so funny.
It all kind of came together in so many ways. She puts up with me. But so Danica and I got married. We started our family, and we've been involved in church here. And, Shekinah was my real grounding place where you and I had met, and so much of our experience and who we are as Christ came through, Roger Lucas and Mike Shea and just so many wonderful people along the way. And now we've been a long time participants at Father's House with Pastor Chuck Tilton, and just we love the people there. We love being there.
So 31 years, what's the strength of your marriage? What's the strength of your relationship with Danica?
Her. I mean... I love, my wife is such a caring, good person. And, I'm a knucklehead, and I love the fact that my wife could wrap you a gift and put nothing in it, and you would feel so loved just seeing what she did with the wrapping paper. Yeah. That's just kind of the way it is. And so people love her. So, I really get a piggyback on her a lot, because we'll go and everybody will love my wife, and that's, and you, Jerry.
She must let you be you.
Well, she doesn't have a lot of choice there. Yeah, she doesn't have a whole lot of choice there. I mean, she rolls her eyes a lot, because what I think is funny, she's probably thinking, I've seen that stick before, but we have mutual respect, and we're fortunate.
You have 2 kids. What would your kids say is the strength of their parents' relationship?
I think that they would probably say, the humor and that we have, and there's the laughter in our household. I think is what they probably say.
Yeah. So at some point you have to make some money, and do all that stuff.
Responsibility.
Yeah. What was that like? Figuring out what you wanted to do with the rest of your life?
That was difficult because I thought I was going to, when you go back in your life, think, what did I want to do? When I was younger, I wanted to be a high school football coach and a high school counselor.
Yeah.
Never coached football. I always regret that I didn't get a chance to do that. Was not a counselor. Was involved, pastored a little bit. I had a failed business that I'd been involved in. I did insurance for a short time, and then kind of fell into real estate. If you would ask me, like, Jerry, do you think you'll be one of those guys that works 6 or 7 different jobs before you find the one you really love? I wouldn't have been that guy. But it's amazing how, the twists and turns have gotten me to where I am. I love what I do now. I'm good at it, and like I told you about gifting, so you got to know what you're good at. And I love the fact that my job allows me to meet people, bless people. It's great. I'll be going along, Jeff, at times, and I'm not a pusher. I can pray with people. I can encourage people. I can help people, and I love all of those things and I make a good living doing it.
Yeah.
So for me, it's just like blessing on top of blessing.
Well, you talk about knowing your giftings. I'm sure that you have figured out that one of your major gifts is communication.
Yeah.
And if you just think about what communication means, what it is, especially from a relational standpoint, you can get a lot done if your gift is communicating.
It opens doors. And you and I have the same gifts. That's clear. Your gifting is the same. Just to be able to communicate with people. But yes, you're right. And I always tell people too, remember something. Your gift is also is the knife that cuts the other way.
Yeah.
So you have to be careful a little bit. Know your giftings. Don't get cocky with your giftings because they're only gifts. They've been given to you to use, and understand they can be used for good or you can use them in a bad way. So choose good.
And it's really tough to stay on track.
Yeah.
Because you realize that there's power in your words, that you can really influence people. You can really change the direction things are going. And you're right. That has always been a challenge for me because I want to do the best for other people. Not just for myself. I want to see other people thrive. And you can accomplish a lot with encouragement and strengthening people and giving people wisdom, and also, confrontation with people too.
I heard something today. It's really good. In fact, I ordered the book, and I'm sorry, I can't think of the author right now, but he said, when you have arguments with people and stuff, he goes, it's like you're on either side, and both of you are pulling, and the knot's getting tighter as you pull and pull. He said, he goes, look at those opportunities as how do you unravel the knot? Not how do you pull harder and win. It's not about winning. It's about untangling the knot.
Yeah.
And so, when you're in that position, don't say, I got to win this, or I'm going to convince you otherwise. Rather than that, why not look at the knot and go, what can we do to untie this make it a whole lot easier, instead of squeezing it, pulling it, making it all the harder to get unknotted.
Yeah. I want to talk a little bit about Longview, and because I know you really have a heart for the city. Obviously, you came back here for a reason. When you think about, you've been through a somewhat a move of God when you were young.
Yeah.
The whole vineyard movement was really a movement. It wasn't about a church or a denomination. It was a movement, and there was a lot that happened there. How do you see God doing something in our city manifesting itself? What will it look like in your eyes?
I really think that it's going to be it'll be birthed out of churches, I think, that are really looking to do what God would want them to do first and foremost. They're people are willing to say yes to God, and it's not just going and just saying, oh, this is a nice thing, we've done our church duty, but rather being a part of the community. One of the things I'm the most thankful for is that I'm thankful I'm not a pastor.
Yeah.
And I don't mean that to discourage pastorships. I appreciate you and your long-term pastoring, Jeff. You had an impact on your community. But it's a tough job. You know that. I keep telling people.
I don't know what you're talking about.
Yeah. It's like, and people go, gosh, I wouldn't mind being a pastor. That seems like, just talk once a week. And I go, you have no idea how hard it is to take a piece of your life every week and try to share with people what's going on and all the stuff that's there. That's a tough thing. So that's not my gig. My gig is that I get to meet people daily And I'm on a numbers of boards and commissions and all that stuff. My master's degree's in public administration. I only say that because I'm pretty good with bureaucracy. Most people, it drives them nuts. I, for whatever reason, I seem to be able to work through that. So I find myself in different positions like that. And I love it because I get a chance to meet these varieties of people, and I can bring Jesus in where I come. And I'm not the guy that's going to come in and say, hey, let me tell you about Jesus. I'm there waiting for the opportunities when God opens a door and says, okay, now. Or live your life in a Christ-like way and let people see that in you. That's going to be the best way to approach it. So for me, it's like being among my community, using my giftings to open up the doors. And then when God gives me that chance to be able to come in and say, all right, here's the living God.
Well, yeah. And I love that aspect of God, the part of his character that just is simply that he's good. Yeah. And if God is good, and you want to be like him, you can be good in a community and do good without all the frills and all the, the super fantastic stuff that a lot of people think is attached to a move of God. I actually think a move of God is actually God's goodness coming and manifesting itself in a community.
That's a great way to put it. Yeah, I love that. Exactly. And I think the other thing that's important too, you say, prayer. Yeah. We just have to keep praying and saying, Lord, come, Lord, do the things that, this community, use us, humble us, give us the things that you want to make this, to bake this cake, to make this recipe work. And so, every time I get in prayer with people, we have at Father's House, we have Wednesday prayers in the afternoon. You've been there. Yeah. And it's so wonderful to see 30, 40 people show up just to pray. It's not like you're offering any food or you're doing something where it's like, I'm going to show up because it betters me. It's just praying to God. And I think those are the things that God just loves. Yeah. And that's why he shows up too, because he just loves that. Like, I want to be there.
Well, that's your experience at Vanguard. Yeah. It's funny you mentioned these four guys because the way my walk with Jesus was energized was sitting in Rick Stonex's house with him and Dwayne Sanchez and Jim Kangas, the four couples, and we just prayed. Right. And I don't even think there was anybody telling us that we should do that. Yeah. It just seemed like, well, we want to be friends. Uh-huh. And if we're going to be friends and raise kids together, we probably ought to pray too. And that prayer was significant. I think that a lot of my walk with Jesus was formed in that little prayer gathering.
And those are some pretty great people you just mentioned too. Yeah. So that's great. Isn't it great how God brings us together with people that we love and who love us? And that's
what's next for you? What's right ahead?
We're
in crazy times, Jerry. Everything's changing around us.
It is crazy times. Most of all, I want to be available. Yeah. Lord, I'm available. And I'm here. God's called me back to be part of this movement in this community. Yeah. And so when something happens here, like I said, Lord, I don't have to be at the front of the line. I can be at the back of the line. I just want to be where you want me to be in that line. Yeah. And I want to be a part of it. And I want to be able to smile in my old age and be able to say, wow, Lord, what a blessing to have been a part of what you did when you poured out onto Cowlitz County, Washington.
Yeah, I think so too. Yeah. It intrigues me because I feel like I've been through a few moves just on the back end of the Jesus People movement, so I didn't get that one. Yeah. That would have been a fun one to be in. Right. Oh, yeah. It would have been a fun one to have that formed you. But
or like our friend Mike Shea, who was actually at, what the big, come on, Jerry, the musical thing, the big
Woodstock. Yeah.
You knew that, right?
Yeah.
At Woodstock, you've got these seminal moments, even though it was not a seminal moment for Jesus, just like to be a part of something like that was just amazing. You remember Mike for that?
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
Pretty crazy.
Yeah. He was formative in me becoming a worship leader. Oh, yeah. Just watching him, the way he engaged with God in front of people was really delightful. I learned a lot about it. Yeah. It was really innocent and kind of messy sometimes, but
it's that way, isn't it? Everything in life is a little bit that way. It's not, the road's not straight all the time. Every once in a while, you got to take a curve. Yeah. And just make the curve, baby. Just make the curve.
There's a lot of talk about the next generation and what they bring into the table. How do you think as you look at the next generation of believers, like 25 and under, what do you think they're positioned well for? Because you've got a couple of kids.
I do have a couple of kids. I just think that it's been really tough for that generation. I think that they've had an extra measure of difficult to some level too. I think the enemy's really moved, and I mean, all the stuff we're seeing with kids and gender issues and all this stuff. We didn't have those things, man. I mean, it wasn't like that. So I think they've got a lot of stuff that's against them, and so. But yet, so often I think when lots is against you, it's amazing how God will take all of those ill experiences and difficult things and make them a strength.
Yeah.
And so maybe in some ways, if they've had the most against them, maybe they'll have the most power in the end to go out and really make some differences in their community. That's my prayer for them. I would love to see that happen with these young people.
Makes me think of David, King David. King David. You know, he just... They made him king, and then everything came against him. Everything was difficult.
Yeah.
And I think there's some real gifting in this next generation that could position them well to serve.
Yeah.
Not just their generation, but all generations in the days ahead.
And the key with David, of course, is that David was a man after God's own heart. Of course, David, though it's not that David didn't make mistakes. He made tons of mistakes. And yet the important thing was that he always repositioned himself back with Jesus, back with the Lord. And I think that if these young people can learn that, man, that will take them a long ways.
Have a conversation with God.
Yeah. Absolutely.
Yeah, that's what he did. He kept going to God and saying, hey, are we going to win this battle? Are you in this? Because I'm not going there unless you're going to be in it.
And God didn't even always answer all of his. I mean, when his child died, and he with the illicit relationship he had with Bathsheba, and sackcloth and ashes, and he was calling out to the Lord. The child dies, and yet then what's he do? He gets up, he cleans himself off, and gets himself together, and says the Lord's made his decision. And moves on with his life. So God doesn't always give us everything we want just because you pray for it. God's going to give us what we need and what's best, because he sees the big picture. This is a very simple illustration, but I always like it. It's like, you're watching a parade, and you're looking through the little hole in the fence, and your dad says, man, you see that great float coming? No, Dad, I don't see it. And you're looking through there, and he goes, well, here, get up on my shoulders and you can take a peek. And then all of a sudden that full perspective comes. You can see the beginning and the end, not just this. And that's what you really want. I want to be able to get up and have a better view. God, show me more. Don't just let me be limited to what I'm seeing through the little peephole.
I'll end with this. I know you have a heart for pastors. I know that you really support your pastor and walk with him and encourage him. You've been a strength to him. What encouragement would you have for the pastors in this community or in Cowlitz County? If you could sit down with all of them, they were all sitting in a room, and you had 15 minutes to just talk with them, what would you talk to them about?
I would tell them the two components they really need to have is truth and grace. Truth and grace.
Both.
That you have to have. You do not get up there in the pulpit and not speak truth. But when you do, have the grace to go with it too. I mean, the two of those equally together will make a huge difference. But I mean, I think so often, Jeff, that again, I have great appreciation for pastoral. I've done some of it, not as a head pastor, but on the lower levels of that, and I've seen it. But I just feel like, listen to the Lord, and you don't have to offend people, but you sure as heck don't need to be up there either. Hedging your bets. If Jesus has told you something, then you tell it. And I think that's what pastors need to have. And you know what? You're going to lose some people. You're going to lose some. It's the way it works. But yet other people are going to be drawn to that. And I think that truth is an important component for us today that we really need to be proclaiming out there for people. People respect that.
Truth, authenticity, honesty, loyalty, consistency over time. I mean, those are all things that we all want to gather ourselves around people like that.
Humility.
That don't quit.
I'll give you an example. This is, I guess I'll throw some praise at my pastor, Chuck, my friend and pastor, Chuck. we just had Pastor Miles come from Turning Point, and love that God's given us this amazing facility, and that's a whole nother story to talk about, but all of that. But we have that. And our dream from the beginning is that God would bring people here, that we would have a place for these people, and we do. And so they'll come here. And so Turning Point, so Pastor Miles, who's in charge of all of the Turning Point faith side of Charlie Kirk's organization, I think it's, what do you see, 36,000 pastors he oversees.
Yeah.
I mean, huge amount. Comes here he is. And so our associate pastor, Sam Suden, has been really among and working with Turning Point for a while. And so we had were you at that? You were at that, right?
The luncheon?
Yeah. No, not at for Miles at the when he spoke that night. Because I saw you earlier, but you stayed for that one in the back. Okay. Anyways, so Sam is up there, and he's interviewing, Pastor Miles. And so, you know what struck me, Jeff? You know what most pastors right there are going to say?
Yeah.
Here's my pastor Chuck down there. Most pastors, and I hate to say this, but are going to say, I want the opportunity to be up in that chair right there.
Yeah.
I want to be talking to this guy. This is me, I'm the head pastor here. I want to do this. This is an opportunity for, No, Chuck said, Sam, you get up there and do it, brother.
Yeah.
I'm trusting. And so Sam my pastor sat down the front row there and smiled so big and loved it.
I think how Sam feels.
Yeah, exactly. But I mean, see the
supported by his
see the humility there. And I'm not saying that. I mean, I told Chuck that. I told Chuck, and Sam did an amazing job too. But I mean, that's what I mean about, let's put God first. Let's put first what God can do to change it. And Sam did a wonderful job, and that's exactly maybe who God wanted up there. And God bless Chuck for just saying, you use your gifting and do it.
Yeah, that's very cool.
Yeah, it was.
Well, I can't tell you thank you enough. I mean, you are a treasure to this city. And I don't think all that many people have really that understanding of who you are. So hopefully they'll get a chance to see and hear a little bit about you through the interview. And maybe it could encourage people that there's more that they could do in just being themselves. They don't have to try to put on something or be somebody they're not, but they can just be themselves. And there's really strength in that. God can really move through us when we're really authentically who we really are, who we've been created to be. And Jerry, you've lived that out. So thanks.
Thanks. You know what? It's Paul Treichel, my dear brother, we miss him dearly. Used to say the road is littered with people of God along the side that have fallen away. Yeah. And it makes you sad, but at the same time you look at it and you say, I'm so grateful. I'm grateful you're sitting across from me, Jeff. Yeah. I'm grateful that I'm sitting here too. That God has been so gracious to us to allow us to continue in the good fight. Yeah. And not that we don't have our issues along the way, we all do, but yet God has still given us the ability to be able to touch lives, influence our community, and be a part of it all. And so grateful for that. So grateful.
Well, thank you.
All right, man. Blessings.